the radio and listening to what was going on. And this was, we were in the railroad car by 12:31, 12:32. We were in almost immediately, as soon as the shooting started, and there was pandemonium, people running all over the place. And actually, when you look back on it, we could have easily have lost ourselves in all of this stuff. We had gotten right up to the grassy knoll, thrown ourselves on the ground like everybody else was, and started screaming, and that would have been the end of it.
How long were you in the boxcar?
We were in the boxcar for a long time. We heard a lot of transmissions. I estimated that it was almost 2 o'clock, because although I still had my watch was still on Arizona time. I have a bad habit of not changing my watch. So, but I thought that we stayed in there till about practically 2 o'clock. I do know that we were in there during the time that we heard the transmissions involving Tibbet and the back and forth. We heard a lot of other communications, and we heard the call that an officer had been down. I'm told that, and I believe that it was somewhere about 1:15. We were told we heard about the incident at the Texas Theater, although we didn't know what happened. So I thought that it was possibly 2 o'clock before we were fine. And the train actually started to move. It started to move, and then it started backing down the tracks a little way. And we thought, well, it's going to move. And then when it started back up, we thought, well, after all, this is a switching yard. They'll probably switch us on to another track. And then suddenly, the thing stopped. They opened the door, and there was a whole passel of police officers there, shotguns, everything else.
You saw some other things in this boxcar.
We saw the boxcar was not a fully loaded boxcar, but in this boxcar was ammunition, unusual ammunition, det cord, crates that looked like they were possibly claymore mines, drums full of what was marked as just marked mud, which seemed to be like drilling mud, which was unusual to be in that type of with the rest of that material, which we assumed, or I assumed, we didn't discuss it, but I assumed it's probably C4 or some plastic explosion.
What did the officers say to you?
When they took us out, they said very little. They took us out. We tried to identify ourselves, and we said, "Hey, we're federal agents. We're working on this thing." And they said, "Well, come with us." And we strolled along. And actually, we went back when we came out of the yards and strolled up by the Texas Depository Building, crossed the street. Or I would say that Harrelson and I were sort of digging along, but Montoya, I mean, he was really digging out. He was right up, actually up behind the lead officer, where they turned us over to two other officers. The officer who was in charge was an individual that we later learned his name was I believe his name was Harkness.
This is a photograph taken during that period of time. Can you identify the individuals? Not counting the policemen, of course.
I can identify them too. But the individual in front was the individual that I knew as Richard Montoya. The individual behind him was the individual I knew as Charles Harrelson. And I have reason to believe that that's who he actually was. Although I didn't know him that well, but I'm confident that's who it is. And I'm the gentleman in the back carrying the bag with the radio went.
Were you placed under arrest?
No, we were not. We were taken across, and someone interviewed us momentarily. We were turned over to someone else, and a person that I learned later was Captain Fritz, came over, said not more than 2 or 3 words to us, and said he was turning us over to the FBI.
Do you recall the FBI agent's name?
His name was Gordon Shanklin.
Did he say anything to you?
He asked us who we were, what we were doing there, and just about this time that we did this, there was a lot of confusion.
Do yourself a memorandum. Say he told me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think.
I don't think that'll help our position.
Uh-huh.
Okay, fine. All right. And you saw that.
Yes, I'm fixing to ask him that. Uh-huh.
How much time do we have left?
20 minutes.
20 minutes? Okay.
We got to get you out of town.
We're rolling.
Yeah.
Both places.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay, we're rolling. And a lot of confusion.
There was a lot of confusion, a lot of pandemonium, and actually a lot of what I would term as jubilation on the part of all the police officers in there, especially the effect that it had on Gordon Shanklin, which led us to believe that our release was because of something else that had happened. They were saying, although they had said it on a couple of occasions, someone else was arrested they caught someone else in the Daltex building, and I heard somebody say, yeah, we got one of them. But then when the matter came in that they they indicated that they had got the individual who killed the cop in Oaklawn, almost at once it seemed to me, even what I consider prematurely, they indicated that, hey, we got the guy who was involved, that we shot the president too. And at that time, the level of attention into us and to other individuals who were around there, because they had some other people that they had detained and looked like they were actually going to arrest, including Braden. Braden was there, and I didn't recognize him at first because he was wearing a hat. He had a hat on with some kind of a Texas-style hat band on it, and I didn't actually recognize him at too much. I really didn't know him all that well, you know what I mean. But I knew that I'd recognize him as easy to recognize you. But once we got in there, and these events came off because they happened almost at the time we arrived there. Then the attention shifted almost at once from us to the to Oswald, who turned out to be Oswald. I assumed that it was just their normal enthusiasm about having captured a cop killer, is what I thought, because they treat cop killers a hell of a lot different than they treat killers of anyone else. Not the president, of course. Mm-hmm. But at that point, Gordon Shanklin, we hadn't been in there too long. We'd been there for a little while, and all this time, and then when we came up there, they were very careless, and we were strolling along, and people was coming by us, and this and that and the other. They didn't treat us as they had dangerous suspects. They didn't handcuff us. Plus, they didn't search us, and we were heavily armed.
Short and sweet now.
Yeah.
Do you remember the building you were taken into?
Well, we went into the building. We went into the sheriff's department,
which was there in Dealey Plaza,
yeah,
close to Dealey Plaza. So you didn't walk far.
No.
You were never charged. Never a statement never taken from you.
Never statement. Weren't fingerprinted. Weren't taken over to the. weren't taken over to the city a jail where I assume we would have been taken.
Shanklin say, "You boys go on."
Yeah.
or-
He said,
and,
well, he said, you're free to go.
did all three of you leave together?
We left together, and they split, and I split too. And I was trying to find, because they weren't going back. I didn't know what they were going to do, but I was trying to get back to California, and then we had Morgan H. Brown was going to take us to the airport. We had already said Morgan H. Brown was going to take us to the airport. We called, and they said he had checked out around 2 o'clock. So we went down this. We were trying to find somebody to drive us out there. Although, look back, I don't see why we didn't just get a taxi cab and go, and put ourselves as far away as we could. They left Braden. Braden didn't get out until probably 3 o'clock. And Braden had a car, and he was driving. Candy was already at the airport because he went out to flight check the aircraft, run up the engines, check everything ready for us to go, and we expected that we would be at the airport about before 1 o'clock. And when we went out there, he'd already pre-flighted the aircraft. Then he asked, they had a flight service there. They had a control tower, which didn't operate all the time, but they did have a control tower. He asked us if we were going to file a flight plan, and I said, no, we won't file a flight plan. We'll file en route.
Okay, when were you aware that the president had been shot and killed?
Well,
Let's take it from flight plan, because we had some coughing, and then re-ask. Okay. We didn't file a flight plan.
we didn't file a flight. If Candy said, are we going to file a flight plan? The weather was good. It was VFR. We said, why file a flight plan? We'll file a flight plan en route, probably with Wichita Falls, and just and get out of town.
When were you aware that the president was shot and killed? When did you first know that?
We heard within 5 minutes after the shooting that someone had been shot. The airways were very, very congested at that time. We heard Sheriff Becker's call on the radio, and we knew that someone was being taken to Parkland Hospital. At that time, we didn't know who had been shot. Probably within another 15 minutes, we knew that he had been both Connolly and the president had been shot, and we learned probably a little after 1 o'clock, I suppose, that the president was dead.
When did you realize when did you become aware that you were actually somewhat involved in the assassination of the president?
The minute the shots were fired, because there was a lot of shots fired.
You were standing alone at that time. Did you ever see Harrelson or Montoya?
Not until we got to the...
Any of the other fellows that you'd prepared identification for? None of them?
Not until we got to only the railroad car, and we never saw any of the other I don't think I mentioned that Rip Robertson was there. We had seen him earlier. We didn't provide him with any identification. Tony Pohaski was there. We saw him, who we knew. We didn't provide them with any identification, but they're long-time agents, and I assume that whatever they got, they could have easily have gotten from the Technical Services Division.
When you made your run for the boxcar, did you see anybody suspicious back in the parking area behind the picket fence or anything of that nature?
We saw a lot of individuals around back there, Now, when you use the term suspicious, I don't really know. We saw individuals back there who were dressed in suit clothes, which was unusual for that area. We saw individuals back there who were wearing other type of work clothes. They had a construction project going on back there, and a lot of those guys were wandering around. We saw people running in all directions. We heard most of it we heard most of it when we refueled.
Need to get him to the airport and describe the airplane. I want to get that on record.
Get that on there, and then I'd like to have, if you don't mind, just the closing question that we talked about earlier.
You have
Yeah,
a little
well,
less than 11 minutes left.
Okay.
I'll be quiet.
You got to the airport. Describe the airplane that Canty was waiting for you in.
The airplane was a Comanche 250, but it was specially modified. It was stall equipped for short takeoffs and running. It had a 3-bladed Hartzell prop on it that you normally don't see. It cuts down on the fuel and everything. It had a supercharger. It had oxygen. It was obviously a very, very high performance airplane for that type of airplane.
Can you recall color or identifying marks?
I had a record at one time of the N number, and I still do have it somewhere, because Frank Belcher ended up selling the airplane for me. It was a, I don't remember the precise color, but I do remember that on the tail of the aircraft it had a monstrous picture of a gear on there, because I think it had belonged sometime to somebody that was in the business of making gears. And that's all I can recall about the plane.
Did you monitor the radio for news or anything of that nature as you took off?
Yes, we did.
What did you learn?
Well, we learned, of course, that we'd already knew that the president had been.
Don't do that, man.
And let's redo that question again.
Okay, as you took off from Dallas in the airplane, did you monitor news, and what did you learn after you took off?
We learned that the news reports were constant about the assassination, who had been shot. We learned that we'd already learned that the president was dead before we left. We learned that Connolly was going to survive. We learned that according to the news reports, that the assassin, whose name they gave us, had been captured. At that time, of course, we realized that we were involved to some extent, and of course Canty wasn't privy to as much information as I was, and we just simply discussed the thing. And at that point, I told him that that I was sure that Oswald had been set up.
Why are you coming forward with this information now?
Well, there's been over a long period of time, there has been speculation about who those 3 individuals referred to as the tramp was. A lot.
Excuse me, I want to get a real good tight shot of you while you answer this question.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean.
Could we go back and could you start your question this way? Think about this here.
Okay.
Okay.
Most clear now.
Okay, we're ready. And question.
Chauncey, let me ask you a couple of real direct questions. You were a young man when you received your first convictions, and those effectively ended in 1942 when you served your last sentence.
Yes.
From 1942 to 1977, it appears as though you were arrest-free according to state federal records, criminal records. Can you tell me real briefly why you were never arrested during that time period?
Well, it wasn't because I wasn't engaged in activities. I would assume that it was because of the most of that time we were under the protection of the U.S. government, that some of those activities that we were engaged in, not for any government agency, but aside from it, that they turned a deaf ear to, simply because of the fact that they didn't want to interfere with other type of operations.
When, in 1977, briefly tell me something transpired in your life and you were no longer offered that protection. What do you think caused that?
It actually started in 1975. In 1975, with the when Schlesinger and Turner came into the CIA, they were purging the CIA of all the cowboys in the field. I was the one, and they sent a lot to prison. I was one of those at that time. I was indicted in 75. I was a fugitive till 1977, at which time I had a whole series of charges filed against me. I finally pled guilty to one count of mail fraud.
Is it fair to say that your life has been a life as a career criminal?
Yes, it has.
A lot of people would not want to believe your story simply because of the fact that you are classified by our society as a person who has spent a lifetime in crime. Why are you now coming forward with this information at the age of literally almost 70?
Several individuals have been wrongly accused of having been the tramps. Possibly some of them deserve to be accused of that or something else. And I specifically refer to someone like Frank Sturgis, who incidentally ran afoul of the law for something else and ended up in prison. Howard Hunt, that was falsely identified as the person that I claimed to be. You see there's a lot of mystery surrounding the assassination. I felt that my information is from a point of view that would probably, if I am believed, it would lay to rest these ideas that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald were just nuts that passed in the night, and that I always felt a sympathy for Oswald, and I just don't feel it's right that he would be, or his children should be stuck with that stigmatism, that's all.
Do you feel that harm could come to you if this is made public?
Possibly.
Do you care at this point?
I care, but I'm certainly not going to shrink from it.